Welcome. Welcome to episode 28, I think this is, of the From the Pure Land podcast. I'm Mel Pine, if I remember my name correctly. And you can find my blog on Substack at melpine.substack.com. I'm pleased today. My blog and podcasts are designed to address the declining spiritual life in the Western part of the world. I happen to do that through my own path has been heavily Buddhist. Jim Palmer recently he put me in his encyclopedia of resources for for people deconstructing religion, and he called me a progressive Buddhist. I kind of like that term, although I don't think I would use it to myself because it might suggest political progressivism and lead people in a kind of a whole different mindset. But it's an accurate term. I'm hoping to help people find a way to a spiritual life in the West. In my case, I think Buddhism would be a good basis for that. I believe in the thing called post-religion. Maybe we're looking for a whole new way of doing that. But my guest today is an expert, a writer in that area, Jordan Bates. The title of his Substack blog is Future of Wisdom. And Jordan, why don't you say hello and introduce yourself, and then I'll start shooting questions at you.
Sure. Yeah, happy to be here. Hello, everybody. Yeah, I'm Jordan. I'm a dad, a husband, writer, uh, rap artist, men's coach, and retreat facilitator, and have been a really curious explorer of reality for many years. I experienced radical opening to life with magic mushrooms around age 19. That was about 15 years ago, and took me on a really winding path of reality exploration. And yeah, that has led to interesting places and having a very integral spiritual approach that integrates a lot from different traditions. And yeah, Mel proposed that we talk after I recently published a piece called 31 Principles of Meta Religion. And yeah, for me, meta religion, there's different things I could say about it, but for me, it points toward transcending and including religion or religious systems. So for me, in my case, I mean, like I said, I integrate a variety of things from different religious systems, different traditions and teachings. But in my case, I was raised Catholic, and after being disillusioned with Catholicism and leaving the church for many years, I interestingly went on a deep journey of healing my relationship with it and reintegrating a lot of Catholicism and the values from my tradition, as well as having a lot of mystical experiences related to Christ and the archetypes, the mythopoetic expressions of that tradition. And yeah, interestingly, I find myself in a place where I don't really feel a need to deeply identify as a Christian or a Catholic, and yet it would be accurate to call me some kind of meta Catholic or something like that because I integrate a lot from it. And I just took my daughter to church yesterday and it felt really good to do so. And I pray and I listen to Christian music, but I decline to integrate a lot that to me seems outdated or distorted within the Christian tradition. So I don't integrate a lot of things that people believe in there. And I integrate a lot from, like I said, other teachings and traditions. And more than anything, I would say my spirituality is just rooted in direct experience. It's just rooted in what have I experienced directly? What have I opened my heart to directly? What does life, what can I not deny about this right here, this reality that's right here, which, it turns out to be precious little that I can really prove about this moment right here. But experience, shows me directly that this moment is an astonishing miracle, that it's even here at all is incredible, and that it just happens to look like this many textured nowness. So yeah, that's kind of an introduction.
You used in your in something you sent me. You used the phrase "direct heart opened experience." Um, I thought that was a neat phrase. Can you expand on that?
Yeah, for sure. So for me, I've had many different types of mystical experiences. I did a lot of exploration with entheogens in my time, including ayahuasca and bufo. Um, so I've had a lot of very profound mystical experiences. And interestingly, though, the ones that impacted me most deeply um, tended to be tended to occur while I was sober, and often it would be while listening to certain types of music. It wasn't always Christian music, but often Christian music, interestingly, or other types of very heart-opening music. And I would have these experiences of just feeling like my heart was just cracking open, and I would just be overcome with emotion, and I would just be crying and just weeping and really brought to tears. Sometimes this would happen too when just looking in my daughter's eyes. I have a 3.5-year-old daughter who has touched my heart like no one else, and she'll just bring me to tears. And it's in those moments when the heart cracks open and the tears come that I personally, at least, feel the closest to divinity, or to what I could call the love of Christ, the love of God. It's interesting because yeah, it's not like I can really quantify or empirically verify those experiences in any way. And they're not as, like, I can talk to anyone and we can both agree that it's self-evident that being is here. Being is here. This is something is here, call it being, whatever this is. Life is here. No one can really deny that. It's much harder to agree with everyone on the idea that there's a transcendent source of personal and suprapersonal love that is infused into the heart of what is here. That's not as generally self-evident. And yet when I have those experiences of the heart profoundly cracking open, that's what the really, for me, just profound and undeniable feeling is in my heart, and in my heart of hearts, is that there is this incredible personal and beyond personal loving intelligence permeating reality, or in the heart of reality. And when I've felt that love, it's just been clear that that's my North Star, you could say. That's kind of the omega point attractor that calls me calls me to rise, calls me toward deeper service and devotion and love for everyone. Yeah.
You know, for me, it's kind of anomalous, strange that somebody born when I was and growing up in the counterculture. I mean, I lived in the '60s counterculture. I have never had a hallucinogenic trip. I have somehow all that. I mean, I've smoked plenty of pot and hash and done various things, but I've never and now I recognize that it's a part of. It's been a an amazingly effective part of some people's paths. I kind of feel too old to, my neurons are too old to fiddle with them now. So I'm not about to to follow that path. And I think, one needs some cautions about it. But thinking about the experiences you've had, my mind came back, and there are a couple of those, meditative experiences I've had of touching the divine, of experiencing the oneness. Um, but another really pivotal moment for me, uh, and I wanted to tell you this because the article you wrote brought back this wonderful memory. I grew up Jewish, um, and I had a traumatic parting from Judaism. And then in my 30s, that parting was when I was a teenager. Then in my 30s, went out looking for a religion I could stomach, a religion I could deal with. And one of the things, and that began my Buddhist path, which continues to this day. But I also joined the Unitarian Universalist Church in New York City, Community Church of New York. And at the time, I don't know if this still is the case, this was in the mid 80s. At the time, it rented its space on Friday nights to a Jewish temple of some sort. And every year on the high holidays, someone from the synagogue, the temple, would come and do something for Unitarian Universalists are open to all kinds of things. So it was perfect. We had this anyway. So the first year that I was there at the high holidays, the cantor from the temple came in and sang some of the prayers that I was so familiar with from my childhood and yet had been alienated from. And here I was hearing them in a safe space. And that brought me to wholeness. That brought me to spiritual wholeness. I could make peace with that. I could reclaim my ethnic Judaism, even though I don't see it as a religion. I've never liked the term chosen people, and I didn't like the fact that when I was growing up. Now it's not this universal, but when I was growing up, girls didn't count as full humans the way boys did, or fully visible in God's eyes in the same way that males did. So, there were a couple of reasons why I wasn't tempted to go back to Judaism. And again, in fairness, I know it doesn't exist the same way now. But anyway, that was it at the time. So that was one of the things that in your article talked very much to me. Um, how about that idea of reclaiming and coming to peace with one's religion of origin?
Yeah, I mean, my feeling after going on this deep, unexpected journey of reintegrating Christianity is that my hypothesis is that the religion we're born into is our native language, spiritually, religiously, existentially. It's ancestrally in our bones and blood in a sense, and if it was encoded in us from the moment we were born, if we were in those contexts, it's in us on a very deep level. And so my supposition is that there's a lot of gold there for most people if they would take the time to try to kind of heal their relationship with it or reintegrate it in some sense. There would probably be gold there for them, and there might be certain things that would be difficult to find elsewhere. Like, for example, a sense of ancestral continuity and a sense of plugging into a deep sequoia-like superstructure that extends into the ancient past, where you really feel undergirded in your spiritual process by a deep structure. You feel like you have a spiritual and religious backbone in a sense that has ancestral continuity into the deep past versus today's new age spirituality or the spiritual but not religious phenomenon, which is a totally valid exploration that I've participated in a lot. It can often feel very ungrounded and just like a vast smorgasbord of an all you can eat testing buffet of whatever you want to dip your toes into, and everybody just kind of floats around from this to that and kind of plucks a little bit from here and a little bit from there, and that's great. And I think at the same time though there was something kind of floaty and ungrounded and scattered about that. And when I did just rediscover that all along I'd had this native language handed to me, and I'd had these ways that I was taught to relate to the divine from the time I was a young child, and I'd had these ways of praying to God and divinity that I had shared with my father and mother before bed for many years, and that we'd shared in church for many years, just getting on hands and knees and praying and saying these familiar prayers and singing these familiar songs and going to churches. When I started to open my heart to that again and kind of heal some of the hurt that had come from some of the more shadowy sides of Catholicism, like being made to confess my sins starting from a very young age and things like that, which might have had its upsides, but I think gave me a pretty overactive guilt complex that I had to grapple with and heal for a number of years. But also having a child too may help me realize that my ancestors designed and built this set of values over centuries because they're values that work really well in the context of family and community. And so, even just to stay put in the pressure cooker of family life and marriage, which was a complete 180 from my previous lifestyle of kind of vagabond like nomadism, even just to stay put and do this whole 180, I needed to reintegrate an operating system that was more conducive to grounding down, being devoted to family, being in service, and humility, and just a kind of simpler family focused life that was less about me being special and needing to follow my bliss and kind of, you know, um, follow my highest excitement and stuff like that, which, I still love to follow my aliveness and I still love to tap into my excitement and my bliss, but there was this other initiation into service and parenthood and family life that I needed to undergo, and reintegrating a lot of my ancestral Christ-focused tradition was really helpful in that respect, and rediscovering that language of prayer and song and being in the cathedrals here in Europe and just feeling that swelling majesty of that architecture. It's been a very healing, deeply nourishing experience that has just felt like there's been a sense of karmic fit or karmic appropriateness, kind of like rediscovering this native language that was always right in front of me, but that I had kind of disowned for a lot of years. So that was my experience, and I imagine others might benefit from something similar, but everybody's got their own path. Yeah.
Yeah, in the article that I'm talking about, well, it's just to shift a little bit. Thich Nhat Hanh and a lot of Buddhist teachers really encourage one to go back to their religion of origin. They say, here, we can teach you mindfulness, we can help you, we can expand you, but go back. learn to live with that religion. Um, that never felt comfortable for me completely. And for me, it's been a long enough process that I still resonate with die die no die die no die die no die no die no die no, and various uh, Jewish songs and chants, and they reach me at a deep level. But I've also heard and chanted enough of the Buddhist and Asian chants that I think it's possible to adopt a new religious family. It's not quick and easy, uh, but I think it's possible. Although you never quite kind of outgrow the the one of your origin. I had a really somewhat unrelated thought while you were talking that there are so many Jews in the United States who practice Buddhism to some extent. It's almost it's very common. We call each other Judists or Boo Jews or whatever the term is, but um, I realize that for many of us, and I'm an example of this, I mean, yes, the idea of a religion where we don't have to talk about Christ all the time is more comfortable for because of we were scared by that in childhood. But another reason it occurs to me is that we can't be conscious of our family lineage beyond 1942 or 43 for a lot of us. The Holocaust wiped out whole villages, whole families, including my own family of origin. Um, and I've done a lot of genealogy and found out what I could about my relatives who did not survive the Holocaust, but I've learned exactly how they died. I've learned a lot about it. I just went through a phase like that. But the other part of it is that uh, it would be almost impossible for me to trace my lineage beyond that. I don't know if that I don't know if that presents a question for you, but the idea of at least reclaiming a new, going back to the previous thought, the idea of at least reclaiming a new religion, how would you react to that?
Yeah, a couple thoughts on those points. I think for me, I haven't traced my lineage back so far either. I knew I was grateful to know all four of my grandparents, and three out of the four were devout Christians. And I did meet a couple of my great grandmothers who I believe were also Christian, but I've never really traced my ancestry beyond that. But interestingly, my experience plugging into that ancestral tradition and superstructure has been just kind of a mystical feeling of that ancestral chain extending back into the deep past, the deep soil. And without empirically looking into who those people were, I feel like I can just feel them with me in a way. And it's like they're more palpably present with me, having reconnected to that language that they knew, that language that they spoke, and that was in their bones and blood, and that they built into this mythopoetic and concrete superstructure that they passed on for eons. And yeah, to the next point, as far as integrating a different religion or shifting to a different religion, totally agree that it's entirely possible to do so. And I think one of the cool things about the way I see meta religion is I see it in a very fluid way. I'm really a fan of this idea of fluidity and all inclusivity, which to me means that all of life to me is sacred. All of life to me is an expression of the one divine essence, the heart of hearts, whatever you want to call the source of life. And for me, that essence is inclusive of all of its different modes and expressions, all of its different perspectives, all of its different religious lenses, mythopoetic lenses, even all of its nihilistic and materialist lenses and things like that. Those are other astounding ways that this one miraculous reality can be with itself and explore itself. And so I'm a big fan of affirming this all-inclusive picture of all of reality as this kind of hyper tapestry, like a novel that God is writing to itself, this most exquisite, multidimensional, hyper Shakespearean grand opera across all these different endless kind of modes and possibilities and perspectives. And I really affirm the individual's right to drift freely among these numberless modes and expressions and discover their own natural center of gravity and where they naturally want to flow and live within this kind of endless range of modes and possibilities within existence. And so for me, that'll look different for every individual. And I think meta religion to me gives me a felt feeling of permission to integrate what deeply resonates from my ancestral tradition and also to not limit myself there, but to also be fully allowed to explore the smorgasbord of options that are out there and kind of integrate what deeply resonates from many different teachings and traditions. And so, in that same vein, I fully affirm an individual's right to discover that their religion of origin, for whatever reason, is not what is best suited for them, and they want to deeply invest or claim another tradition as their most primary tradition. And I would also encourage them to notice, if they want to, they can be a Buddhist who still holds an appreciation for aspects of their Jewish heritage and can still listen to Jewish songs and be deeply, deeply impacted. And that those two things don't have to be contradictory. Because I think a lot of people get really stuck in this feeling of like, I need to choose one or the other, or, if I become a Christian, I have to reject everything else and the rest of it has to be satanic. And that's where I think my message can potentially help some of those people because I think we're about ready for more of us to begin moving into a more fluid and all-inclusive place where we recognize that there's wisdom and beauty to be found in all of these different traditions, all of these different ways for reality to relate to itself, and that you know, we can respect our ancestral traditions while also moving beyond them to explore other religious possibilities and other possibilities that you don't even have to classify as religious or spiritual. If those categories don't resonate, you can just be with reality as an astonishing mystery. Everybody has to find their own intimate ways of relating to this. So, yeah.
Yeah, many of us grew up in religions that use the term convert. You convert to Judaism, or you convert to Catholicism, or you convert to something. And I don't know if you can say this for most Eastern religions. Maybe so. I don't know if you have to convert to be a Hindu. You just become a Hindu. And similarly with Buddhism, you don't convert to Buddhism. If you want to practice Buddhism, at the least, you uh, take refuge in the Buddha, take refuge in the Dharma, take refuge in the Sangha, the community. Maybe you also uh, adopt the five precepts for lay members, which are I'll do my best not to kill, steal, lie, sexually misbehave, or take intoxicants. But and those are not commandments, they're guidance. Um, so it doesn't require leaving something. And there are a lot of, well-known figures in conventional religions who have also considered themselves practitioners of Buddhism. Have you, Jordan, are you interested in the kind of the marriage of quantum physics, philosophy, and theology that kind of looks at some of the things we're talking about? I'm kind of fascinated by the fact that I think, that intuitively, I think the Buddha felt this, I feel this, I think many of us feel this intuitively. I feel part of an integrated net. Oh, here I wear the endless knot as a symbol of interconnected web. And I think, through some of the quantum findings, there are some interesting theorists. One of them that fascinates me, although I would argue with some of his findings, but his basic ideas fascinate me. His name is Bernardo Kastrup. He's Dutch. But anyway, Jordan, have you delved into any of that?
Yeah, thanks for asking about that. I'm certainly not an expert in quantum physics and haven't delved too deeply, although I'm fascinated by what I do know about it, what I have seen. For example, that according to some of those guys, when you do experiments at the quantum level, you discover that reality behaves differently depending on whether or not it's being observed. And so, yeah, that, for example, suggests a kind of inseparable, uh, strange fusion and interplay of subjective and objective, and, can be extrapolated out toward a vision of reality that accords with the idea that reality is kind of like a Rorschach blot in a way, or like a infinite dimensional kaleidoscopic Rorschach test that is just it's morphing and shifting, and depending on who's looking at it and from which angle they're looking at it, it kind of morphs and shifts and shapes itself to accord with whatever lens or perspective you're applying. And that to me is really fascinating because I find it endlessly fascinating that every person in the world has a different perspective and a different worldview. And yet, whatever this mysterious reality is, every single person thinks that they're experiencing reality as if it's mapping on to their precise perspective. So it's in a profound sense presenting itself differently depending on who's looking at it and from what angle they're looking at it. And it's kind of the ultimate chameleon in that way. And I think that it kind of gets at what the Buddhists refer to when they talk about emptiness, and this quality of what could also be called unresolvability or indefinability, where if you look really closely at anything, you start to discover that what we conventionally think things are. Like, generally we would just say, oh, yeah, this is just a water bottle. I know what a water bottle is. But if you look closely at it, you realize that it can't be separated out from the rest of existence. Kind of like that Carl Sagan quote where he says, in order to bake an apple pie from scratch, you must first invent the universe. You look at it closely, you discover, okay, to really say what this is, I would have to say what the whole universe is. I would have to say what being itself is, because being, existence, is a necessary precursor for this to exist. And I and no one else can really pin down or say what being, what existence is. It has this quality of unpinned down ability or unresolvability. It doesn't collapse down to anything you can put inside of a neat kind of structure or a conceptual frame. And so when you discover that, that can open up into this sense of vastness, because suddenly it's like, oh, reality doesn't isn't confined or collapsible down to these narrow kind of categories and constructs that we typically place it within. And it's, yeah, it's much vaster than that. It's just like open, it's free, it's this unpindownable kind of dance of energy. And by being that unpindownable dance of energy, that's what allows it to conform to any perspective that you applied to it, any lens that you look at it through, it will seem to accord with that lens. That's kind of my experience of reality, at least. And so then, yeah, that becomes really interesting to play with, because then it's like, oh, well, no wonder everybody thinks that their particular perspective or opinion is true, because any perspective or opinion that you deeply internalize and you deeply grab onto, it will tend to become experiential. You'll actually see reality that way. It won't just be an opinion, it will become your reality, because reality has this quality of chameleon-like shapeshifting to accord with whatever we're um, with whatever we're holding it to be. And yeah, I find that really fascinating. I find that really fascinating. And it kind of speaks back to the meta religion point about how any religious system, which is kind of like a collection of mythopoetic lenses that get deeply internalized, reality becomes experiential within that particular set of lenses. And so, the Muslim really has experiences of Allah, and the Christian really has experiences of Christ, and the Hindu has experiences of Krishna. The mythopoetic language that has been deeply internalized, reality, like water, fluidly shapeshifts to fit the container in which it's being kind of explored. And yeah, I find it really fascinating and fun to kind of then try on different lenses and have different experiences of what reality can be. And for me, for some people, they might say, oh, well, that, just then it's just all meaningless then, because it's like, oh, it's then none of it's objectively true. It's just kind of a perspective or something. I don't really see it that way. I feel like it opens into a more astonishing picture where it's like, oh, wow, everything gets to be true. Like every perspective is true in that sense. It's experientially true because reality has this capacity to shapeshift into an actual experiential lived version of whatever perspective you're holding it to be. So it reveals reality as an even more astonishing thing, instead of just being like one static kind of objectifiable picture of things. It's like everything at once. It's like everything everywhere at once, and like any way you hold it to be, it can dance with you in that particular way. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know if that was a interesting monologue. I'm curious what comes up for you in relation to that.
Well, I started smiling partway through because it's an introduction for me to kind of explain one of my more, what many would consider wacky uh, beliefs. Um, in general, I kind of believe everything and nothing. In other words, take the story of the Buddha's of Siddhartha's first 29 years living in the palace. And, it's a wonderful story. And from what we think we know historically and scientifically, and, there were no kings and palaces in the area where, the story may have some elements of truth. It also has some elements of stories that existed before the Buddha. Uh, but the story is true. The story is real. I mean, enough people have told the story and believe the story. It makes a kind of reality. So I believe them both. That the story is and isn't real, depending on, well, then you get to the two truths thing, and that's a whole different rabbit hole I'd rather not go down right now. But what I did want to come back to is my feeling about afterlife. If you look, and this is where, some people like Bernardo Kastrup and other quantum people who are very scientific minded have come to the conclusion that there must be an afterlife of some sort. Uh, and, if you look at things logically, everything else, every atom that exists in us, again, if science is correct, goes back to a big bang. And it's all been here. Everything in the universe, there's nothing new that has been added to the universe. And we're just kind of rearranging. We don't even know what to call them yet. Are they particles, fields, quantum, whatever they are? We're rearranging these constantly and making new things. So it would make sense that the consciousness, let's call it, that's me, will exist in some form. Um, uh, Kastrup calls it mind. There's a little m mind and a big M mind. I'm the middle M. I have the middle M, the lowercase m mind, and there's a kind of a meta mind that all the minds are part of. And so at death, something's going to happen to my mind. Again, you can call it consciousness, mind, whatever, whatever, soul, even. Um, and if you read stories about Tibetan rebirths, you read the Dalai Lama's story, how he was found as an infant, and there are a lot of other Tulkus reincarnations that you read their stories, and they're pretty convincing about those things. On the other hand, in the West, we have other kinds of stories. I believe that what's going to happen to us on death depends on the culture and mental framework that we grew up with and that we live with. So I do believe that as long as I am 100% certain that I live in the Pure Land, when I die, I'll just kind of have to send out change of address cards or something to a different Pure Land, or to an ultimate Pure Land or whatever. And if I'm wrong, hey, I'll die smiling and happy anyway. Um, so anyway, yeah, I'll shoot that back to you now. But that's my one wacky theory.
Yeah, that's really fascinating. Thanks for sharing that. I liked your point about stories being true as well. Just to touch on that briefly, some people have suggested that archetypal stories, in a way, can be more true than the stories we live in our day-to-day lives because they're kind of like a super distillation of so many themes and so much wisdom into a single story that they take on, yeah, a level of reality, a level of kind of meta reality that makes them almost in a sense more true than what we live day to day. So I like that idea that whether or not the Buddhist story is historically accurate, it is clearly an archetypal distillation that has had tremendous impact in the world, and it takes on a life of its own. And as far as the afterlife, yeah, it's interesting that you said that because I was literally when you brought it up, I was literally about to say that I am very open to the possibility that what we believe and the maps that we've really deeply internalized or the perspective we've really deeply internalized will determine what the afterlife experience is. And I don't I don't know that. I don't know what's going to happen, but in accordance with what I'm suggesting about this kind of kaleidoscopic, hyperdimensional Rorschach blot, chameleon shapeshifter like nature of reality, where it accords with whatever perspective we project onto it, that would kind of make sense, especially if reality is consciousness fundamentally, which is another thing that I don't know about. You know, some people can become kind of dogmatic about that particular frame. I don't know, but it seems like a pretty, I mean, for one, we don't know what the word consciousness actually refers to. It's kind of good to just take a step back and always notice that all language is imprecise and misses the mark in a sense, and we don't know what this word consciousness really refers to. At the same time, we can get a general approximation of what it's kind of pointing to, some kind of self-awake, ether that everything is fundamentally constituted of. And so, yeah, if reality is consciousness and is this kind of shape-shifting chameleon, then and in a sense, our deep beliefs and our deep architecture of perspective and mythopoetic lenses are shaping or generating, in a sense, what we're experiencing, then that lends itself toward an idea of an afterlife that accords with whatever our deeply held perspective is about the afterlife. And I once heard Timothy Conway, interesting guy, talking about, I don't know if he was talking about a mystical experience where he ascended through different forms of heaven and he kind of saw the Jewish heaven and the Christian heaven and the Buddhist kind of clear light and went to these different places. And myself, I've journeying with entheogens um, with ayahuasca in particular, and also with Bufo. I feel like with ayahuasca, there tends to be more of a visionary component of seeing like beings or personages. So with ayahuasca, I've seen like Buddha realms and like the Christian heaven, or I've had experiences of visiting these places. And with Bufo, it becomes more formless. You just melt into just pure light, for example, or you go to like pre-vibratory stillness, and that's just all there is, and that's all that you are. And so I know that these experiential possibilities exist within the infinite field of whatever this is. And yeah, my experiences having had those entheogenic journeys where I really seemed to die in a sense. They really seemed like near death experiences. It feels almost like you and everything you've ever known, especially with Bufo, it really feels like you and everything you've ever known. And the whole universe is just dissolving, collapsing into nothing. And it's like you hit the pipe, and while you're still inhaling, everything's already like dissolving. And by the time you lay back and hit the pillow, it's like the whole universe has just died, just dissolved. Everything you've ever known is gone, and you're just melting into infinity in whatever form. And so those experiences did leave me with a very strong impression of an infinite consciousness that we all are, and that persists for all of eternity, or is beyond time, you could say. So more accurate to say it transcends and includes all of time, and it exists in a trans spatiotemporal dimension of pure pure light, pure luminosity, pure love, pure power, pure intelligence. And so yeah, I lean toward a feeling of an afterlife. And I haven't really been cultivating a particular view of what it is, but maybe I should should invest more in a particular view so that I can potentially shape my afterlife experience. But yeah, thanks for asking about that. It's a very interesting topic.
That's one of those things you get more serious about as you get older, getting, and getting a little more. As a matter of fact, I was going to mention Andrew Holochek's book, Preparing to Die, and that's one of the things I did about 2 years ago or so. Read his book because I thought it was time for me to have some ideas about what was going to happen to me. Um, and in that, or there's an appendix to that book, which he put online somewhere too. It's on the web, and it's the answers he got from a number of influential Buddhist teachers about, and I forget how he phrased the question, but he asked them all the same question about what happens when you die, or how do you prepare, or something like that. And the one answer that sticks so well in my mind, and I've heard the same idea from other teachers. Well, you're going to die the way that you lived, you know. Um, oh yeah, I know what else I wanted to add. That I had one brief meditative experience, and in Buddhist meditation, the teaching is not to get attached to one meditative state. Like you want to get back to it. You just let it, you just let it be. And this is just this couple of seconds and I'll let it be. But I was existing without form, or at least without a kind of defined form, in a sea of all beings. Um, and that was it. There was a consciousness and nothing else, again, I don't know whether to call it consciousness or thought, or there was a me of some sort. So my sense from that is that when one dies, one doesn't just melt that if that mind or consciousness continues, as I believe it will, it doesn't just melt into a oneness, but it retains some sense of self, um, as it does. Um, and we've probably been, I haven't timed this exactly, but we've probably been going for about an hour. So people are going to get sick of us soon. So unless you have something you'd like to add before we wrap up, why don't we get close to wrapping up?
Sure, yeah. Um, I guess to wrap up, I would just say to everybody from the heart, thank you for listening and just thank you for being you. And just in my experience, you can really trust life. You can really trust the process of nature, of what this is, and you're loved beyond belief. You're loved beyond all imagining, and you're a child of God, you're a child of divinity, and it's all okay. So just sending a big hug to everybody and many blessings. God bless.
Thank you, Jordan. I guessed right in that you've been a fascinating interview, and I think this will make good listening, and maybe you all be well and happy.
Thank you, Mel.